Hey guys, thank you for stopping by. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. And I hope you enjoyed this interview. Hello and welcome to the program. Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for joining us today. I am Nancy Naji, so we will get started with what we've lined up for you today. But today on the program, our conversation will be focusing on inflation, but we'll be looking at another dimension of it. At least in the last 3 days, we've tried as much as possible to look at the different dimensions of inflation, the causes, the impact, the solutions. But today we're going to be looking at the impact of inflation on microfinance and indeed small loans. My guest will be joining me shortly, but let's get started with telling you that we may just be having the first Nigerian that will be going to space. That human space flight is not just a random aspiration of Nigeria, but a major objective of the National Space Policy and Program, which has been approved by the Federal Executive Council. Just take a listen to this.
Our partners, we have signed MOU today with the CIRA, that is Space Exploration Research Agency from America. They are covering us 100% financially. So Nigeria is not spending a dime, So you can see we are blessed.
All right, moving ahead, presently Nigeria's small and medium enterprises are facing so many challenges in carrying out their business activities. So in view of this, the Minister of Youth Development, Jamila Bio Ibrahim, at an event organized by UNDP in collaboration with the African Continental Free Trade Area, that's AFTA, stated that the vision of the ministry is to ensure that young people are made the catalyst of Nigeria's socio-economic development.
Is to ensure that we make young people the catalysts and drivers of Nigeria's socio-economic development, and that translates to Africa's socio-economic development as well. A booming MSME industry in Nigeria will take our young people off the streets, providing them with gainful employment and a sense of purpose. This not only reduces their vulnerability to negative influence, but also instills in them a renewed hope for their futures. This discourse on exploring the AFCTA's opportunities for small and medium-sized enterprises in Nigeria is timely and highly relevant to what we do at the Federal Ministry of Youth Development.
It's an agreement that has been signed by 55 countries, ratified by 47. It's the largest free trade area in the world and 1.4 billion people. And so this agreement, the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, is providing opportunities for us to be able to trade amongst ourselves as Africans, because Africa trades only 16.6%. If we are talking about development financing and by extension foreign direct investment that is dwindling, we have to ask ourselves, why is it dwindling? It's dwindling because of the impact of COVID, it's dwindling because of the crisis that we have in the world, it's dwindling because of the geopolitics of the world today, where financing is shifting from many countries, including from many countries in Africa. And so what the AFCFTA does is provide an opportunity for trading amongst ourselves. Now, when we begin to look at trade, don't look at people bringing money. Look at what is it, the man selling or woman selling adire, and the one producing leather in Kano, or our manufacturers in Aba. What is that opportunity? If we can support them, including through domestic financing, I think when we heard today in the conversation, there are different instruments that the government has made available, either through the Ministry of Trade, or through SMEDAN, or through the Ministry of Youth, to support young people. We must look into these opportunities, and then how do we work together to aggregate, bring together, cluster all these SME? What are their needs?
Our strategy for small businesses is access, and we're democratizing access. The first is access to capacity development. A lot of our small businesses are not taking advantage of this agreement because they don't even know about the agreement. The awareness level is very low. So one of the things that we want to begin to do head on is to start to spread the gospel. And we can do this with a lot of advocacy. And I'm very thankful for UNDP for the work they're doing in terms of this sort of advocacy, and ECOWAS as well.
The opportunity is in terms of the market size. The opportunity is in terms of reductions of tariffs and non-tariff barrier. The opportunity is that you've decided to come together as a regional bloc. We trade in different blocks. So all these 8 regional blocks have collapsed into one single market. So the opportunity of a single market, the opportunity of the populations of the Africa, and the opportunity that your goods can move freely from one country to the other is there without restriction.
All right, let's quickly take a break, and when we return from the break, we'll get into our conversation proper. Don't forget to connect with us on all our social media platforms. We'll be right back. This is Moneyline with Nancy. I am Nancy Naji. Does that mean that when there's a new government, the people managing perhaps the economy or any sector should now be agitated that there's a new sheriff in town and all of us will be asked to go?
Well, it depends on how you look at it, and great question, by the way.
It's a great question, Nancy.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nancy. It's a good question.
The school does not teach us about money, and this is money line. So we are the one that teaches people what financial education really is.
A lot of things that we need to address in this country, and one of those things definitely is corruption.
Let me start by commending you for what you've been doing for years. As I said, I've been following your show for almost 10 years now.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to help me to come to this great program.
Be the best you can be, and be the change that you want to see. Welcome back. I said earlier that we'll be looking at inflation impacts on microfinance and small loans. And in fact, when I was thinking about this topic, Mohammed Yunus, who is a Bangladeshi social entrepreneur and economist and a Nobel Peace Prize winner in 2006, who is also the founder of Grameen Bank, came to my mind. He did say, I think in 2013, that microfinance, microcredit unlocks capital, especially to poor people, and we've seen what he was able to do in his country through Grameen Bank, and of course that model was what we actually copied here in Nigeria. But of course, over the years, I've discussed microfinance on the show, and if in fact in Nigeria, if we're still sticking with that model, of course, we've seen the advent of fintechs, as it were, or even digitized banks now. Will that also be a risk to microfinance banking in Nigeria. While I was also thinking about this topic, of course, if you followed us all through the week from Wednesday, we've looked at the different dimensions of inflation, causes, impact, solutions. Yesterday, we talked on the show how Nigerians are coping. But today, we're bringing you this topic because even in times of inflation, Nigerians are moving now to a lot of borrowing. You've seen a lot of loan sharks and all of that. Is the microfinance institution still strong and all? But I have the expert with me here. I have the managing director of Mutual Trust Microfinance Bank with me. He's Josh Oyebisi. Hello, Josh. Welcome to the show.
Good afternoon.
Good morning.
It's still morning. Okay.
Yes, it's still morning.
You know, I'm always way ahead
but anyway, you know, from wherever part of the world you're watching us, because the world is a global village and it's an international television. So welcome to you, Josh. And
thank you very much.
Where do I begin? Is microfinance still working for the poor?
Yes, it is. I mean, it's...
For Nigeria's poor?
Yeah, for Nigeria's poor. I mean, the way we're structured, microfinance banks are the institutions that actually have the DNA for dealing with the economically active poor. You have the commercial banks want to take the higher spectrum of products and services to the middle class and the upper classes. But microfinance banks are the ones that are able to reach the grassroots, the economically active poor. When you think of microfinance banks sometimes, don't just think of the fintechs or the banks that you see in the towns. There's a lot of microfinance activity going on in the villages, in the smaller towns. And you know that there's a huge cachet, the huge amount of cash that is outside the formal system where people at the bottom of the economic pyramid play. So microfinance is working in Nigeria.
On a scale of 1 to 10, tell me why it's working. Because if microfinance is still working, or microfinance banking, let me not say microfinance, because even as a person, I can give loans to people. That exercise could also be tagged as microfinance. That means I'm giving like small loans. What I'm doing is like microfinance, as it were. But I'm saying now, if microfinance banking is still working, because if it is still working in Nigeria, why do we still have the number of unbanked people in the country?
Okay, well...
And perhaps financially excluded.
But there's been, in the past 5 years, there's been great improvement in the numbers. You know, the regulator, the CBN, has been very, very focused on deepening financial inclusion. And you've seen, well, we're a huge country, 200 to 50 million people. You've had millions of people brought into the banking basket in the past 3, 4, 5 years, basically through credit and lending activities. People that normally would not have access to cash to expand their businesses, to engage in economic activity, have had the opportunity. And a lot of microfinance banks are also collaborating with cooperatives, with women groups, with local credit associations to ensure that we deepen the provision of microfinance services, banking services to the grassroots.
So how has inflation impacted your industry?
The real worry is the erosion of real income to the working classes and the economically active poor. I mean, food inflation was 24% thereabouts a year ago. We know what it is today, it's 40%. So if you needed 20,000 to feed a family a year ago, you know what you need now, close to 40,000. So that's been the real worry. The purchasing power has been eroded, and in many instances, when people want to borrow, they need much more to be able to do the same thing they did a year ago. And then guess what? It's double whammy, because the other spectrum of it, you're borrowing at higher rates. Because usually when you have inflation, you've seen what's happened with the MPR. In the past couple of months, at 26.25% now. You know, so you're borrowing higher to do the same thing you were able to do. So the effect is twin, because you have higher borrowing costs, and then of course inflation eroding the purchasing power. It's a worry for everyone, and I think everybody affected. I mean, you and I have dependents also, and I know the issues that come on a daily basis, especially for those of us who serve very large numbers of the bottom of the economic pyramid.
You talked about interest rates. Give me a range of what interest rates that your sector charges now because of the adjustments in NPR. How has that impacted interest rates for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, of course, NPR is the rate at which the regulator lends to the commercial banks. And then microfinance is deemed to be more expensive, I mean, to service all over the world because you're dealing with large numbers of people, and then you have to look at small files. Some have been able to bring down the cost driving with technology. So the rates now are between 30% and 45% now.
Really?
Yes. Well, some of the commercial banks are lending at 30%, 33%. So it's
A
affected.
microfinance bank is supposed to be lower rates than what the commercial banks, fundamentally or realistically speaking.
Actually not.
Idealistically speaking, from Mohammed Yunus that invented this.
Okay, but even check the rates at which the Grameen Bank is lending, much higher than what the traditional banks do.
As at now?
Even till now, even the Grameen Bank, and you had issues in India some time ago where government had to step in, and you need to always realize that microfinance banks use private enterprise, private equity to fund the business. There's no CBN window. Usually, there have been programs that have targeted certain sectors through collaboration with microfinance banks. But outside that, microfinance banks are also borrowing to do business at higher rates.
I'm just trying to take a look at the interest rate of Grameen Bank that you do. Is what I'm saying, okay, deposit rate 91 days, about 6.35%. That's for Grameen Bank because you are challenging
flat,
and saying,
yeah.
But I will come back to that.
Yeah.
For you to say that interest rate, this is big, because I'm thinking of just what you told me now, 30 to 40%.
But you also remember that these are small sums. I mean, if you're borrowing, if you need to borrow money, you know the kind of money you will borrow. You would, of course, scream, but somebody needs 20,000, 30,000 on the short term, or it's evolving, and he wants to apply it to his trade. It's the impact is not
at 40%, how much will that person now pay back?
Well, it's significant for anybody at the level, yeah.
Yes, it's still significant.
Which is why we are very careful in hand-holding and financial advisory to people we deal with at that level, because you are applying to productive activity. We're able to walk you through the park to ensure that, okay, let's look at the numbers. What are you able to do? What will this achieve for you? There's a lot of financial literacy, which the traditional banks do not do. Financial training, financial capacity building that we do. So microfinance banks are more socially inclusive in order to ensure that they impact society. So
at that level, sorry to butt in
yes.
again. At that level, are you talking about production or even survivability? Because for someone that comes to your bank that wants to get 20,000 or whatever it is, at that level, is it survivability? Is it production they're talking about or survivability?
So you're going to ask, I mean, what is this for? And some of the counseling is, okay, is it possible you don't need this? If you're applying this for food, is it possible to cut costs? Are there excesses? I mean, what are you applying for? We know that the basic essential needs are food, shelter, clothing, and some will argue transportation, Of course, if you want to borrow to engage in productive activity, you have a trade going. We're also looking at how best, where you're sourcing your materials from, who do you sell to, what are the margins, are your margins able to take care of yourself and your family, at the same time take care of the rate you're paying. So it's there's no size fits all, but it's important that we've been doing it to pay attention to the economic agents at that level of the pyramid.
Give me averagely how much people from your people that want to get small loans, how much is the least that is given to them?
Yeah, from 20,000 to 500,000.
Okay, is 500K the maximum?
No, you go up to 1 million, but because first and foremost, you need to understand that the regulation is clear on who you are paying attention to. So it's microcredit. You want to ensure that you are targeting the cachet, the niche for which you are focused. And there are core capabilities that come with facing that particular segment over the years as against what the traditional banks do. We understand them, their nuances, the social impacts, the things happening at that level of the environment. So really, yeah, sometimes we do about 500,000, but many times you're even able to counsel. Well, you thought you needed 1 million or 700,000, but we run the numbers and we see that actually you don't need more than 300,000. So that's also very important in the financial advisory part of it, in counseling, in training, at that level of banking.
So if your maximum is about 1 million naira, with inflation, has that been impacted in terms of the volume of monies that you lend out? Perhaps if you could give one customer like 1 million before, you'd be like, no, if I want 1 million, no, just take 500 or 400. Let us share. Has it?
Yeah, we've had that.
Perhaps because of inflation.
Yeah, we've had that scenario many times. But something that is encouraging is the resilience of the Nigerian spirit. When you sit down with people and you say, okay, 1 million cannot achieve this anymore, what are the other options? How can you increase productivity? Increasing productivity doesn't always mean you're throwing money at the scenario, at the issue. Fine, the real value of the currency has been challenged, and it's a problem for everybody. You're constantly running the numbers, constantly.
Are microfinance banks threatened because of what's happening right now? And what level of threats? Because some microfinance banks too have failed in the last few years, even big ones, as it were, supposedly big ones that are almost too big to fail in that sector.
Yes. But at the same time, you also had commercial banks have all manner of challenges.
Everywhere. You want to give me, so you tell me the Heritage Bank.
So, I mean, you always have that in banking. Even
but it seems that the rate of failure in microfinance banks are higher
because
than
there
for
are
the
more.
Banks.
I mean, you had 900 microfinance banks at the time.
How many do you have now? Do you know?
About 700.
700.
Plus.
So
it's a huge number. So, I mean, how many commercial banks do you have? So usually you want to be concerned about the governance issues, microfinance banks. You want to be concerned with funding. Then delinquent loans are, of course, a major problem. Many times because of the scenario in which we find ourselves, you have to really, really monitor the activities of the economic agents to whom you have given loans to ensure that first the money is applied judiciously, and that it's able to achieve the goals of the lending.
The other question now, because we live in a high inflationary environment, have you raised your credit levels to match the real value of loans? I hope you understand what I'm saying.
Yes. I do. Well, that's a tricky one because because we have regulations in place, but there have been fora in which we're taking up discussions with our regulator on some of the ceilings, because, of course, it's clear to everyone that you may need to apply more money to achieve the same thing. But these are ongoing discussions in most places. Somebody comes to you and you can only do this. The same person sometimes is also in a cooperative where they're able to lend or offer support. Sometimes we collaborate with the cooperatives who may at sometimes be closer in some instances to the economic activities to ensure that we handle these kind of scenarios. A major concern also is you have to watch out for over-leveraging, over-borrowing, because it can also create negative social impacts. We saw in India some years ago, some people even having mental emotional issues because they could not pay back
Some people
their
committed
loans.
suicide.
Yes, some people committed suicide. So we are very, very careful to entertain amounts outside that range, even though we know the inflationary pressures.
How do the poor handle the issue of microcredits? Because it's also on record that the poor pay back
Yes.
easily than
Yeah.
the supposed big men. After they will say, after all, everybody
Yes.
they owe, Nigeria gonna serve they owe. You see, big men, even the billionaires in Nigeria are chronic borrowers. You know, not that debt is bad, but when you see a poor person that comes to perhaps your bank to borrow, that person will not sleep any longer. If they are not able to you know, pay back, they have high blood pressure and all of
Yeah.
that. Some may even commit suicide, or some may do, you know, acts that are not encouraged. So
Yes.
how do the poor, Nigeria's poor, handle the issue of microcredits? How has it been in the last few years? I know why I'm asking that question, and I will ask the second one when you answer this.
Well, I think we had a lot of issues even coming out of COVID when business started again. We started to move around. It is critical that you're able to dimension the scenario from the credit interview. It's extremely important that you understand exactly what the borrower wants to use the money for, so that from the get-go, you're able to advise and then apply the necessary amount to the economic activity. And then second is the ongoing relationship and hand-holding. We call it loan monitoring. So I'm calling you weekly. How are you doing? So we're able to know what problems are arising from your marketplace before it's time. Like you said, those are that level of economic activity are more likely to pay back. They are more concerned. So even when they have problems, many times they reach out. Oh, we're having this issue. We're having this supply issue. I'm having issue with customers, and so we're involved in their lives as much as possible, and the financial aspects, to also help and counsel and empathize. It's not easy. It's a lot of work and sweat, because you can be on the phone or in a meeting for hours on a seemingly simple matter. But to you as the bank, it looks simple and small, but it is the life of the client you're dealing with.
Okay, why I said I was going to ask that question is because of the growth of loan sharks. Yes. And you also see that the poor have gravitated to loan sharks. The urban poor as well as even the rural poor.
Because you have to make that counter distinction between the urban poor and
yes, I know what I'm saying. That's a rural poor and urban poor. There are also loan sharks in the villages, in the rural areas. Nigerians have gravitated to loan sharks, and if you see that the way they've gravitated to loan sharks, there's also a lot of debt also in that area, whereby many loan sharks do not get their monies back, and they begin to send threatening messages to, I don't even know how they get all the stuff, but you know, that, you know, using all sorts of words. So the way borrowers behave now, borrowers' behavior in Nigeria is changing, because they'll be like, okay, just do anything you like. Do anything you like. So how does that also affect you, your sector? Because if people are also moving to loan sharks, I can also deduce that perhaps the microfinance banking sector is also failing in some area. Because you have microfinance banks that should be in urban centers and also in rural areas. Yes, because you have to serve the urban poor and the rural poor. So you understand my question?
Like I said, we are a great number of people, 250 million people, and scattered with diverse ethnicities and all that. So it's good that government stepped in to regulate the activities of some of these companies, because, for example, before I give you a loan, the credit bureaus are very active and very up to date. I'm checking, are you a delinquent borrower? Do you have outstanding loans? It's not just to avoid loss, but to also help you, you know, as the borrower. You know, but some of these firms just came out of nowhere. They were very reckless. But I think regulation is dealing with them then. The same argument you made, you can say, but the commercial banks were there. they could not serve the economically active poor like we wanted to and promote development. That's why we embraced microfinance. So it's an ongoing process to find solution to the financial issues that will drive productivity. But I think that microfinance banks have done a lot with the small and medium scale enterprises. I mean, we have hundreds, thousands of people come to us that they could not get a loan from a commercial bank because the loan file was small, it was not deemed maybe worthy of attention, and they were able to pay attention to some of those files and understand the business scenarios in which the client operates and would be able to step in.
Isn't it a threat? The loan sharks, are they not a threat to you guys? And even the fintechs as it were. And I'm also seeing that some of the fintechs are also buying microfinance banks.
Yes.
And some of those fintechs are also having microfinance banking license.
Yes. Well, so that's in the regulations sphere. I will not pretend to speak for the regulator. But you know that traditionally, fintech is not a bank. But so if we acquire a banking license, then you must learn the practice of banking, and you must subject yourself to banking regulation. And there are things we do in banking. There are rules and tenets that we have spent decades learning and understanding, which have proved true over the years. So some of these guys, why you see some opera and all that, is that they are practicing financial intermediation without knowing the foundations and the rules of it. But I think all that is being tackled, especially with the social outcry on the loan sharks.
Okay. If we take a look at what's happening right now, do you see an end to this? And what would be your advice to government as to tackling inflation? Because the more inflation gets higher, the more the central bank increases MPR. As they increase MPR, you guys will adjust, And there's the issue now of sustainability of business when it comes to that. Because when you have high inflation, a lot of things, businesses are also running risk, because we even see some businesses, big multinationals, exiting the country.
Oh, well, some economists will argue, I was still reading, I don't want to mention the name, one of the economic juggernauts was saying yesterday that, well, the rate increases have slowed down the rate at which inflation was rising. So that seems to be some bright spark. And an economist this morning, renowned, when I was reading this morning, was saying that even though food inflation is at 40%, but in the coming months, as you see the impact of the rate increases by the Fed, by the regulator, you'll have food inflation actually drop over the coming months. So it's not going to continue to spiral. I think there is some positivity in what both the monetary policy and the fiscal policy are doing to tame inflation. And sometimes you want the changes immediately, but it takes a little while for it to feel the effects. But I think they're on the right trajectory, even though it's painful to some of to households at the bottom of the pyramid. But I'm a very optimistic person. I believe it will get better. And then the Nigerian spirit is also...
that Nigerian spirit, they are dragging us too much. It's overstretched now. A lot of people are complaining. My interview on inflation and how Nigerians are coping, surviving. In fact, my guest told me that they shouldn't talk about resilience again. She said something which was very instructive, that Nigerians are out of tips. We're out of hacks and we're out of tips, because the last 8 years or the last 9 years, we were all managing, we're all stretching. Now we're overstretched. So our resilience should not just be put on our faces. It's just time for action.
Are you part of that group?
I'm echoing what people are saying, and I'm also, I also go to the market. I feel it.
Yeah, it's really,
I think my resilience too is even stretched. As a person, my elasticity now, dead there again like before.
Well, but this is our country.
I understand that we need
200
to have
million
hope.
People live? Yes. Do we all leave the country? And,
no, we can't all live. But the posture by the government, that was why I asked you that question in terms of what can government do now to drive down inflation? You mentioned the food inflation over 40%. Inflation is affecting your business. Yes. You don't want to close down your bank. Yeah. If you do that, the staff you have will go. Yeah. Where will they go to? So I think we just need to be realistic and not painting or use lipstick like I used this morning to color it.
Well, some of the things that have affected food inflation, insecurity, poor farm output, in some areas climate change. These are things that are within the purview of government. I know there are several programs and schemes to address this. It's extremely important that we get better with security so that people will be able to, stay on the farms. I had my own cousin who lives in the UK, came here, invested in 20 hectares, and then several kids, in around the southwest in Ibadan, several of his staff were kidnapped many times. He just got fed up, shut down the farm and left. And so it's extremely important.
He came from the US with his own investment.
From the UK.
Okay, UK.
Yeah, so,
and he went back.
Yeah, so it's extremely important that we get that right and tackle security. It's been getting better in some areas. It's still a challenge in other areas. Then productivity in agriculture is extremely important too. Mechanization, use of technology. I had also a friend who increased in the agri-food chain, increased his productivity by 40% by just installing a small train to move products from a silo to the crusher. And just a few meters stretch, and he increased productivity by 40%. He said that's one of the best decisions he's ever taken in his business. So it's important for us to properly use technology to drive agriculture. Yorubas, where I come from, have been saying that when you have sorted out food issues in your poverty is solved. So it's important that we get to the point of food security, that we're able to get better productivity from agriculture, and then it will cascade to other areas of economic life.
Now, talking about tech, how have you been able to adopt technology in your space, especially within this high inflationary? Because I want to imagine that in this inflationary environment, high inflation environment, you don't want majority of your job or your whatever you're doing to be a bit manual. Yes. How are you using technology? Because that would also enhance productivity for you and reduce cost.
We have several things going on. Of course, a lot of people use the apps, online channels. Then you have USSD, which is very important for the less literate. It's very easy for them to use to make requests for loans, to check accounts. And everybody has to, you have to embrace technology going forward because it enables you to do a lot more with less resources. And it can even be used to address the inflationary trends and tame it a little, because you find long run you are spending less to achieve more. So technology is very, very important in all aspects of life, essentially.
What is the impact of inflation on the repayment capacity of small borrowers?
Huge challenge.
Because she's told me at the 20,000, about 30 to 40% repayment capacity. How has it been?
Huge challenges in some areas because sometimes you have clients who have planned and they don't know the homework, but things just go wrong. So at that point, it's important to have credit counseling sessions and many times refinance. But like you were saying earlier, the sincerity of the economically active people that is much higher. So even when problems start arising, they come. Many times you have to reschedule and understand the borrower's scenario and what the challenges are. That happens actually across all spectrums of banking anyway. So it's not peculiar to microfinance.
Are there still opportunities for growth in the microfinance sector despite inflation?
Definitely. You still have, I can't remember the percentages now, of financially excluded
people.
Yes, it's important. But a lot of inroad has been made in the past few years, but there's still room for growth. It is the biggest room in the world. It's room for self-improvement, room for improvement generally.
Even though you have about 700 of you?
Our population keeps increasing. In a couple of years, we're said to we'll be at 400 million. I think about a decade from now.
2050.
So, and then you have a huge portion of young people coming into adulthood who need these services. Also, the opportunities for deepening into the interland, exist everywhere. So the opportunities for growth are huge.
How has this scenario, how has inflation impacted the savings habit of people? Because microfinance banking, part of what you offer is savings.
Yes.
Small, that kind of ajo that is
Yes.
informal in marketplaces to move it to your space. So how has it impacted the savings habit of Nigerians? Do we still save?
Yeah, people still do because first of all, you earn more from savings now because of the increased rates.
Okay, yes,
so that's one of the things it's doing
but
to
it's still less
encourage
than
savings.
10% now. The last time
You
I
know.
calculated that 6%. How many percent now they do? Because it's 30% of NPR.
And then, of course, you know that you have better consideration when you need support,
Okay.
when you have savings. You have a savings culture, and it's been shown
gives
that
you history.
yes, it gives you history and an opportunity for you when it's needed to be able to access credit.
So are you saying that the savings habit of Nigerians, especially in the microfinance space, is still intact? It hasn't been threatened?
It is. I mean,
or the savings have gone down a bit, that people are now eating into their savings?
Well,
we'll come to bank today, I beg, give me, or you'll be seeing transfer.
The,
when you look at your dashboard, you see a lot of people are making withdrawals.
Well, sometimes what you are hearing in social media sometimes is different from what's happening. I mean, the last Monday, I mean, you saw the drivers, some of the drivers in one of our offices were gathered around an app, and that app floated by some cooperative in Lagos where they save 500 naira per day, and they are so true to it, you know. So, and I investigated the app. The guy has been able to serve about 300, 400,000 people who are saving on a daily basis. So let's all lose hope in. When I was talking about the resilience of the Nigerian people, is the depth that we have is uncommon in diaspora. People are still saving a lot at that level. In fact, a lot more than in other levels of banking and the financial spectrum.
Let's talk about one sticky issue that is still there for you guys that has not been resolved yet. The issue of recapitalization. I know that the CBN is a bit mum on it now because your association, you're not the president. I talked to your association president some time ago.
I know.
You know, and he spoke about recapitalization. So how are you people feeling about it? Especially now with the recapitalization process for the bigger banks that is ongoing now.
Well, it's not just about the regulator. The business environment requires that you have deeper pockets because you need to be able to do more to achieve the same thing. So, well, everybody is working at it and looking at opportunities. Those who cannot operate at that level will scale down to the appropriate level of license or business that they can handle. But we're looking forward and seeing that, well, it's likely will come around. So, I mean, everybody's gearing up and preparing for it as much as they can. And, you know, these things are not strange to banks and banking over the years. We know it will always come around. When you saw the value of the naira was at some point years ago, it's now at this point. You don't need a crystal ball to tell you that you will need to up your game, you know, and recapitalize.
Okay. So what's the future outlook as we close?
I would bet on Nigeria. I will bet on microfinance. I will bet on our services getting better. I mean, we see a lot of reading from other places in the world, even more prominent, maybe countries with better needs. You'll be shocked at some of the services they don't have, that we have. I was shocked to hear, let me not mention the name of a country in Europe that they just started getting SMS alerts 3 years ago.
Our banking and payment system in this country is something to,
you know,
so, that I know, yes.
And then we tend to, even when we acquire ideas from other spheres, we tend to run better and faster with it.
But the rest of the country is not moving as fast as our financial space.
Well,
I don't want to go into that. You imagine for elections, for example, we are still trying to think of how to get, what's it called, voter's card. Meanwhile, I think I can even come into your bank and get ATM card immediately.
Yeah,
Meanwhile, you know, so it's like Nigeria's payment system is really getting faster than the others. But that's a discussion I had during the election. So.
Well, I stay in my sphere. I stay in my lane.
Yes.
So, but I will bet on Nigeria. I will bet on things getting better because we just must find solutions to our problems, and the solutions must be homegrown. Some of the economic ideas from the West and other climes, when you bring them here, you know, the reaction is different. The way it would play out here is different. So we need to keep coming up with homegrown solutions to our problems.
Okay. I want to say thank you very much. Have we
Thank
exhausted
you.
this, or you want to say anything
No,
else?
no, I'm good.
You're good. All right. Thank you very much for joining me. I'll be
Thank you,
speaking with
Nancy.
Josh Oyebisi, who is the Managing Director at Mutual Trust Microfinance Bank. Let's quickly take a break, and when we return, we will end the program. Do stay. All right, welcome back. Just before we go, let's quickly take you through what global central banks, the actions are so far. Of course, we know that our own central bank will hold its next monetary policy meeting in July, but so many global central banks have been acting, and I would say majority of them have been cutting interest rates. The Bank of England held rates at 5.25%. If they are not cutting, they are holding it. As UK inflation fell to 2%, you know that UK election will come up on July 4. Rishi Sunak has really gone to town talking about UK inflation falling. Let's see how that pans out for the election in the next coming days. Swiss National Bank, that's the central bank of Switzerland, it has also cut now it trimmed its own policy rate to 1.25%, and that is the second cut of the year. The Norway Central Bank kept interest rates at 4.5%, while the People's Bank of China, of course, China is the second biggest economy in the world, it held its policy rate at 2.5%. For Sweden's risk bank, it also cut our rate to 3.75%. The meeting is due on June 27. Bank of Canada also lowered its interest rate to 4.75%, and that made Canada the first G7 country to cut interest rates. ECB lowered rates to 3.75% on June 6th. Of course, Christine Lagarde, who is the ECB's president, did make a statement on that day, the first time in 5 years that the ECB is lowering interest rate, of course, coming from post-COVID. U.S. Fed, all eyes on U.S. Fed's Jerome Powell. It held rates on June 12th within the band of 5.25% to 5.5%. I had to bring this back, and I'm talking about this because when you see central banks, it's like I always say on this program, central banks move like teenagers, as it were. you know. I don't know what Cardoso, because I know that Cardoso CBN will be watching what other central banks are doing. But I also know it's a different scenario here in the country, that Nigeria is suffering from runaway inflation at about 33.9%, according to the NBS at the last count. At the next MPC meeting, with the posture of Cardoso in the last 3 meetings that I have seen, Mr. Cardoso is not on the way to hold the brakes anytime soon. That's according to my own analysis and what he's told us to at the MPC. They've raised interest rates by 7.5% since the last time interest rate was at 18.75%. So we'll get to see what Cardoso's led MPC will do in July. But of course, when there's a favorable global investment climate or global macroeconomy is a bit stable globally, you get to see that also impacts other economies, smaller economies like ours, as it were. So you're seeing that the US Fed is streaming, the UK is holding, ECB is streaming. We'll begin to see that also impact us. But what that also means is that if we're not careful, monies can also begin to move from here overseas. So That's too much today on the show. I'll see you again next time. Be the best you can be and be the change that you want to see. So you've got to be the change because the change begins with you, isn't it? That was a Nigerian slogan at the time. Great people, is it great nation, good people? So whatever it is. But I'll see you all again next time. I am Nancy Naji. Bye for now. Thank you for watching. In case this is your first time watching us, thank you. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, drop your comments as well as like, and most of all, share our content.